Welcome, class, to a workshop on Coach Joe rules. In this lesson, we will review Coach Joe rule number 43, which states, avoid passing null arguments. Not the keyword null, not an object or variable that is null. When you see a null value being passed to a method, a warning should go off. Is this being used properly? There are a few situations where it is acceptable and several that are questionable. Here are some acceptable examples. A method that performs an assignment action, like a property setter, a null value can be passed. Be sure to consider a well-named method with no parameters as a better option. It is common for a constructor to also allow null parameters. There are default values and no parameter options as well. Third-party code can also allow a null parameter. Although it goes against the spirit of the rule, you will need to honor their method signature. For this rule, let's focus on methods written in our application. Normally, passing a null value is bad practice. All rules are meant to be a reminder, suggestion, or guideline. If you know the risk it presents, then you will know when it should be followed and when it can be ignored. Look at this example from an adventure game application. What is the purpose of passing the keyword null as an argument? The code is fundamentally unreadable. Unless you're familiar with this application, you will be forced to inspect the contents of this method. Drilling in exposes the next problem, state. This method must account for parameters in a valid and invalid state. The monster object puts the data in a valid state. Null or a null value puts the data in an invalid state. This means the method will need to do two things. Here is a common null check pattern used to prevent a null pointer exception, and the intended action is performed against the non-null value. Optional parameters are another kind of null. They must also account for both states. It is preferred to reduce the complexity of the method by only passing in objects of a valid state. By moving the null check outside the method, it helps keep the code cleaner. With that being said, often this rule is impossible to follow. If your application controls the creation of the object data, an invalid state can be prevented. Make an empty object, use a null object pattern, or assign a default value. Anything but null. The bigger problem is when outside data is provided to your application. Data from a database, web service, or the dreaded user-provided data. This data can be in any state. At some point, this null data might be passed to a method in your application. Your goal will be to control and limit the number of methods that receive null parameters. Some popular options are wrapper methods that convert data to a valid state, and conditionals that filter out invalid state. Although null parameters are allowed, I challenge you to avoid or limit their use whenever possible. Leave a comment down below when you think null parameters are acceptable and when they are not. Look for other helpful Coach Joe videos. Remember, future senior developers, make it work, prove it works, then make it better. Ready, break!